The first snow of Christmas Eve fell soft and steady, dusting Manhattan's sidewalks in a pale shimmer. Strings of golden light stretched across Fifth Avenue, glowing against a frosty night, while families crowded near shop windows decorated with toy trains, Santa figurines, and plastic snowmen that blinked in cheerful reds and greens. It was a kind of evening that looked like it belonged on a holiday card, cozy, familiar, nostalgic. Michael Carter, however, didn't feel any of that magic. He stepped out of his sleek black Range Rover, tall and composed, his polished shoes crunching into the thin layer of snow, a navy wool coat draped over his tailored suit, the picture of success, or so it seemed to anyone passing by. But behind his sharp appearance lingered something more complicated. Weariness, grief, a heaviness he could never quite shake. "Daddy, wait for me." The small, high-pitched voice broke his thoughts. Michael turned just in time to see his 4-year-old daughter, Kelly, jump down from the back seat, her blonde curls bouncing beneath a knitted white hat. She held her father's hand with the kind of complete trust only a child carried, her mittened fingers small but firm in his palm. "Stay close, sweetheart," he told her, adjusting the hat snugly around her ears. "We'll go see the big tree at Rockefeller, then head home for hot cocoa." "Sound good." Kelly's face lit up with a smile, so bright it could have melted snow. "Okay, Daddy." Her excitement was infectious. For a brief moment, Michael allowed himself to smile back. They began walking along the block, weaving through clusters of tourists, snapping pictures beneath wreaths and garlands. Kelly chattered about Santa, how many cookies they should leave by the fireplace, whether the reindeer would really eat the baby carrots she had hidden away in the fridge. Michael nodded and answered, but his thoughts drifted. It had been 2 years since the accident, since his wife, Hannah, was taken from him in the span of a single phone call and a moment of twisted metal on the highway. 2 years of trying to fill a silence so vast it echoed in every room of their penthouse. 2 years of being both father and mother, of balancing investor calls with bedtime stories. He was proud of the life he kept together for Kelly, but no matter how many Christmas lights surrounded them, a part of him always felt dark. Then Kelly's voice broke again, quieter this time. "Daddy, why is she sleeping there?" Michael followed her small, mittened finger to a wooden bench tucked under the flickering glow of a bus stop sign. There, curled up beneath a dusting of snow, was a young woman. She couldn't have been more than 20. Her blonde hair was tangled. Her sweater, so thin it looked like it belonged in another season. And in her trembling arms, wrapped in nothing more than a frayed blanket, lay a baby. The sight pierced him. Michael's first instinct was to tighten his grip on Kelly's hand and keep walking. New York was full of stories like this. Tragedies you couldn't solve, lives you couldn't possibly take on. He had worked hard to teach Kelly compassion, but he also knew there were limits. Except Kelly didn't budge. Her blue eyes widened with worry. "Daddy, she is a baby. He looks cold." The wind picked up, sharp and biting. The baby's tiny fingers peeked from the blanket, trembling against the air. Michael froze, torn between logic and something deeper. Logic told him he couldn't bring strangers into their lives, not with Kelly in the picture. But then he looked down at his daughter's face, so innocent, so earnest, and realized she was waiting for him to do something. He bent down, unwinding the bright red scarf from around Kelly's neck. She didn't complain. She simply watched as her father knelt beside the young woman and carefully draped the scarf across the baby's fragile body. The child stirred, lips moving faintly in his sleep, a soft whimper breaking through the stillness. "Miss," Michael said, his voice low, urgent but gentle. He touched her shoulder lightly. "You can't stay out here tonight. It's too cold." No response. Her lips were pale, tinged blue. She clutched the baby even in her unconsciousness, the way a mother does without thinking. Michael leaned closer. "Please wake up." His voice cracked against the frigid air. A group of carolers passed on the corner, singing Silent Night. Their harmony felt strangely out of place, because nothing about this moment was silent inside his chest. Then the woman stirred. Her eyes shot open with fear. She clutched the baby tighter, pulling him toward her chest. "No," she gasped, her voice hoarse. "Give him back." Michael held his hands up calmly. "He's freezing. You both are. Please come inside." She tried to stand, her legs trembling. Her sweater slipped from one shoulder, revealing skin so pale it almost blended with the snow. "I don't need your pity," she muttered, her tone sharp but weak. Michael studied her. Beneath the frost and exhaustion, her eyes burned with defiance, a mix of desperation and pride. "I'm not offering pity," he said firmly. "I'm offering warmth." The baby stirred again, letting out a faint, wheezing cough. The sound cut through both of them like glass. Michael scooped the infant into his arms. His own daughter's scarf was the only barrier between the baby's fragile body and the cruel December air. "You can come or not," he said, standing tall, determination etched into his face. "But I'm not leaving him out here to freeze." The young woman's arms twitched, as though every instinct screamed at her to grab her baby and run. Yet something in Michael's eyes, not suspicion, not judgment, but something softer, almost fatherly, made her hesitate. She whispered, barely audible, "His name is Noah." Michael nodded. "I'm Michael. My car's right here." For a moment, her gaze flicked to the Range Rover parked by the curb, glossy, expensive, utterly foreign to her world. Then back to her son, bundled in a stranger's arms, breathing unevenly but warmer now. Her feet moved before she even realized it. Inside the car, the world felt surreal. Heat blasted softly through the vents. The tinted windows muffled the city's noise. Grace. That was her name, though Michael didn't know it yet. Curled up in the back seat, her arms wrapped around herself as if she still didn't believe this was real. Kelly peeked over her booster seat, her wide blue eyes meeting Grace's. "He's really tiny," Kelly said, voice filled with childlike wonder. "Like a snowflake." Grace blinked rapidly, fighting tears. She had once believed in fairy tales, back when she was in college, back when she had a family. That was before the promises, before the shame, before the night spent hungry so her baby could eat. Now she had nothing but the little boy sleeping in her arms and the sudden, bewildering kindness of a man she had never met. Michael caught her gaze in the rear-view mirror. For the first time in 2 years, he felt something stir in his chest besides grief. He didn't smile, not quite, but his face softened just enough. Christmas Eve, he thought, a night meant for miracles. The Range Rover rolled through the snowy Manhattan streets, its tires crunching against ice and slush. Michael kept one hand steady on the wheel, the other resting on the gear shift, his mind torn between questions and instincts. In the back seat, Grace leaned against the door, her body rigid, her gaze darting between the man driving and the baby resting against her chest. Her arms curled around Noah, as if any sudden move might snatch him away again. The warmth of the car's heater fogged the windows, but her shoulders still trembled. Kelly, strapped in her booster seat, swung her legs innocently. Her bright eyes studied the young woman and the bundle she held. After a few long, quiet moments, Kelly broke the silence. "What's your baby's name?" Grace blinked, then whispered, "Noah." Kelly's face softened into a smile. "He's really tiny, like a snowflake." For the first time that night, Grace's lips twitched upward, though faintly. It wasn't a smile so much as a crack in her walls. Michael caught the exchange in the rear-view mirror. He didn't speak, but something shifted in his chest. He remembered holding Kelly when she was that small, when her cries echoed in the sterile silence of the hospital room after Hannah's accident. For months, he had rocked his daughter through grief neither of them had words for. Seeing this fragile baby stirred pieces of that memory, sharp and tender all at once. They drove in silence for several blocks until the skyline tilted into view. Michael's building, a sleek, modern tower of glass and steel, rose above the city, its rooftop shimmering with frost. Grace's eyes widened. She pulled Noah closer, as if instinctively bracing herself against the contrast between her world and his. The doorman nodded politely as Michael guided him inside. He didn't ask questions, but his glance lingered a little longer than usual. Grace kept her head down, her soaked sneakers squeaking against the marble floor of the lobby. When the elevator doors opened to the penthouse, Grace froze. She had never seen anything like it. Hardwood floors polished to a mirror sheen, floor-to-ceiling windows revealing the city lights stretching endlessly across the skyline. In the corner, a towering Christmas tree, glowing with golden ornaments. It looked like something out of the movies, a life she once thought she might have before everything unraveled. Michael carried Noah into a guest bedroom, where a pristine crib stood in the corner. It hadn't been used since Kelly was a baby, but Margaret, the housekeeper, had kept it spotless. He gently lowered the child inside, adjusting the red scarf around his tiny chest. Grace lingered in the doorway, her arms crossed tightly over her sweater. Her eyes never left Noah. "You're safe here," Michael said, his voice softer than she expected. "Take the room. Rest. We'll talk in the morning." For a long moment, She didn't move. Then, with a slow nod, she stepped inside and sat on the edge of the bed. She didn't take off her coat. She didn't unpack. But when she finally laid Noah in the crib and placed a hand over his chest, the exhaustion hit. For the first time in months, she slept without one eye open. The next morning, the smell of coffee filled the penthouse. Grace had risen before sunrise, her body conditioned to survive on little sleep. She had found the laundry room by accident, where she washed Noah's blanket and her thin sweater. Then she quietly moved into the kitchen, where she cracked eggs into a skillet and toasted bread. The house gleamed with wealth, but she couldn't shake the urge to work, to repay what she owed, even if no one had asked her to. She was rinsing the dishes when Michael entered, still in his robe, hair slightly disheveled from sleep. "You're up early," he said, surprised. Grace shrugged lightly. "I work for what I use. Always have." Her voice wasn't bitter, just matter of fact. A statement carved from survival. Michael studied her for a moment. "I'll make the coffee." Grace gave a small nod, returning to the pan. For a few minutes, they stood in companionable silence, two strangers in the rhythm of a family kitchen. The spell broke when a voice called out sharply from the hallway. "Sir." It was Margaret Hill, the Carter family's longtime housekeeper. She had worked for Michael since before Kelly was born, practical to a fault and fiercely loyal. Her sharp eyes swept the kitchen, instantly spotting the extra plate, the faint scent of baby powder, the unfamiliar footprints. Michael turned to her calmly. "Margaret, this is Grace. She and her baby will be staying here for a while." Margaret's brows knit together. "With all due respect, sir, you don't know her. What if she's after your money? It happens, especially to men in your position." Grace froze mid-step, the towel in her hands damp against her fingers. "She was sleeping at a bus stop," Michael said, his voice firm. "With her infant. This isn't a scam." Margaret pursed her lips. Even so, kindness should be measured, especially with Kelly in the house. Grace's chest tightened. Her eyes burned, but she blinked quickly, unwilling to let them see her cry. Without a word, she turned and slipped down the hallway toward the guest room. Her hands trembled as she began packing Noah's things. She pulled his blanket from the crib, folded it quickly, and dressed him with shaking fingers. Her whisper cracked as she pressed him close. "Let's go, baby," before we were out to welcome. She opened the door quietly, hoping to leave unnoticed. But Kelly appeared out of nowhere, barreling down the hallway with crayons, still clutched in her hands. She nearly toppled Grace as she wrapped herself around her legs. "Please don't go," Kelly cried, her blue eyes wet. "Mommy said helping others is the best gift. You and Noah are our gift." Grace froze, stunned by the child's words. Then came footsteps. Michael stood at the end of the hallway, hands in his pockets, his face unreadable. He had heard everything. Margaret's doubt, Grace's quiet retreat, Kelly's desperate plea. And suddenly he was back in that hospital room 2 years ago, holding Hannah's hand as her final words broke through the silence. "Be kind, Michael. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." His throat tightened. "You're not using us, Grace," he said softly. "You're doing everything but that." Grace stood rooted. Noah pressed her chest, Kelly clinging to her legs. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then her shoulders sagged, and she let out a shaky breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Michael stepped forward, his voice steady. "Please, stay." The day moved slowly, the snow outside falling in soft sheets against the windows. Inside, something fragile was forming, a truce, an understanding, the first threads of trust. Grace sat in the sunroom that afternoon, a space filled with light where she could watch Central Park's trees dusted in white. She found a box of old art supplies tucked in the corner, brushes, sketch pads, charcoals. Tentatively, she picked up a pencil. Her hand shook at first, then steadied. Lines curved across the page, capturing the faint outline of Kelly perched on the couch, her curls haloed by the sunlight. When Kelly realized she was being drawn, her face lit up with delight. "Can you draw me with wings? Like an angel?" Grace laughed, a sound she hadn't made in months. "Maybe," she said, shading the curls just so. From the doorway, Michael watched, arms crossed loosely, expression softer than Grace had ever seen. For the first time since Hannah's death, the house didn't feel like a museum of grief. It felt alive. The snow outside hadn't stopped since dawn, blanketing Central Park in a sheet of white, so pure it looked untouched. From the sunroom of Michael Carter's penthouse, the world seemed distant, muffled, safe. Grace sat cross-legged on the window seat, Noah cradled against her chest, while Kelly sprawled across the rug with crayons scattered like confetti around her. Grace had always loved mornings like this. The quiet ones, the ones where the city's constant hum faded into something softer. But she hadn't experienced them in years. Not since she left home. Not since every sunrise became another battle to survive. "Can you draw me as a fairy?" Kelly asked suddenly, holding up a blank page with wide, hopeful eyes. Grace hesitated. She hadn't picked up a pencil for anything other than grocery lists and shelter paperwork in months. But the way Kelly looked at her, expectant, innocent, sweet, stirred something she thought she'd buried. "All right," Grace said softly, reaching for the sketch pad she found tucked inside an old wooden box in the corner of the room. The supplies smelled faintly of turpentine and dust. The brushes, the paints, the half-used pencils, they weren't hers. They belonged to someone else, someone who had once lived in this space. "They were my mom's," Kelly explained, noticing her curiosity. Her voice carried a note of reverence. "Daddy says she painted a lot. She used to sit right here by the window." Grace's hand stilled on the page. She glanced at the box again, realizing what it meant. These were Hannah's tools, the remnants of a life Michael and Kelly had lost. For a moment, she felt like an intruder. But then Kelly scooted closer, tugging at her sleeve. "Please." So Grace began to draw. Her lines were hesitant at first, shaky from disuse. But soon the old rhythm returned. The pencil moved in smooth arcs, sketching Kelly's curls, her mischievous smile, her little shoulders that seemed too small to carry all the love she gave. Grace added wings, delicate and feathery, stretching across the page. Kelly leaned in, eyes wide. "That's me?" Grace nodded, smiling faintly. "That's you." Kelly clapped her hands, her laughter filling the sunroom like music. "I look like an angel." From the doorway, Michael stood silently, coffee mug in hand, watching. He hadn't seen anyone touch Hannah's supplies since the funeral. For years, the box had just sat there, unopened, too painful to deal with. And now this young woman, a stranger only days ago, was breathing life back into it. He didn't interrupt. He just stood there, studying Grace as she bent over the page, her blonde hair falling loose, her face softened with concentration. For the first time in a long time, his home didn't feel like a museum of grief. It felt alive. Later that evening, Grace tidied the sketches and placed them neatly on the sunroom table. She hadn't planned on sharing them, but Kelly was too proud to keep them hidden. "Daddy," Kelly squealed as Michael stepped inside after a long day at the office. "Grace made you something, but you can't see it until after dinner." Michael raised a brow, amused. "Is that so?" "Promise," Kelly insisted, holding up a pinky finger. He hooked his pinky with hers, smiling despite himself. "Promise." Dinner was simple: roast chicken, salad, and fresh rolls Margaret had brought in from the bakery down the street. Grace offered to help, but Margaret, though still cautious, allowed her to set the table. Noah gurgled happily in his high chair, wrapped in the same red scarf that had saved him on Christmas Eve. Afterward, Kelly all but dragged her father into the sunroom. "Close your eyes," she demanded. Michael obeyed, humoring her. When he opened them again, she was holding a folded piece of paper. He took it, unfolding slowly. It wasn't just a drawing. It was a memory. There on the page was a Rockefeller Christmas tree, drawn in soft charcoal strokes. Beneath it, a man knelt to tie the shoelace of a little girl in a white hat. The girl's hand rested gently on her father's shoulder. The lights above them glowed in halos, captured with surprising detail and warmth. Michael's throat tightened. He hadn't even realized Grace had seen that moment. He hadn't realized anyone had. "I didn't know you noticed," he said quietly, eyes fixed on the page. Grace stood near the window, her arms crossed protectively over her sweater. "I notice things people forget to see. she murmured. Their eyes met just for a second, and in that silence, something passed between them. Unspoken, fragile, real. Days slipped by in a strange, gentle rhythm. Grace spent her morning sketching while Noah napped, Kelly at her side, requesting picture after picture. Sometimes it was silly things, a puppy with a crown, a princess riding a dragon, a snowman with sunglasses. Other times it was moments from their life inside the penthouse. Michael reading in his study, Kelly twirling in the living room, Noah curled in his crib. The apartment, once cold with absence, now rang with laughter. The scratch of pencils, the babble of a baby discovering his voice. Even Margaret softened, though she'd never admit it outright. She left extra muffins on the counter, muttering about too much food anyway. But not everything was easy. Grace still carried shadows. At night, she sometimes woke in a panic, clutching Noah as if he might vanish. She still packed their things in the corner of the room, ready to leave at the first sign of rejection. Michael noticed, though he never pushed. He knew better than anyone that healing didn't happen in straight lines. One afternoon, Kelly curled beside Grace on the couch, coloring while Grace sketched in her pad. She was unusually quiet, her brows furrowed. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Grace asked gently. Kelly hesitated, then whispered, "I don't remember my mommy's face anymore. Just her voice. Is that bad?" Grace's heart clenched. She pulled Kelly close, wrapping an arm around her. "That's not bad," she said softly. "Sometimes love isn't in the pictures we remember. It's in the way we feel when we think of them." Michael, who had just stepped into the room, stopped in his tracks. He hadn't known what to say when Kelly asked that same question weeks ago. And now, hearing Grace answer with such tenderness, he felt something shift deep inside him. That night, after Kelly had gone to bed, Michael lingered in the sunroom. Grace was gathering her sketches, ready to retreat to her room, when he spoke. "You brought something back into this house I thought was gone." She froze, unsure how to respond. He held up the drawing of him and Kelly at Rockefeller. "Hope. You've given us hope." Grace swallowed hard, her fingers tightening around the sketch pad. She wanted to dismiss it, to say she hadn't done anything at all, but the sincerity in his voice stopped her. For years, she had been invisible. To her parents, to the boy who abandoned her, to a city that walked past without a glance. But here, in this penthouse with a man who had lost as much as she had, she wasn't invisible anymore. The days after Christmas slipped by in a rhythm that felt almost too gentle, too good to be real. The penthouse filled with sketches taped to the refrigerator, Noah's laughter echoing through the halls, and Kelly's endless chatter. Grace had started to loosen the invisible grip she carried, the constant readiness to leave, the fear of overstaying her welcome. But the city outside didn't stop, and neither did Michael's world. His work demanded appearances, dinners, charity events where reputation mattered as much as donations. He tried to keep those obligations separate from his home life, but one Thursday morning, as he poured coffee in the kitchen, he surprised Grace with a question. "There's a gala this weekend," he said casually, though his tone carried weight. "Would you go with me?" Grace froze mid-motion, the dish towel in her hands suddenly too heavy. "Me?" Michael leaned against the counter, his gaze steady. "You'd be saving me from a dozen awkward conversations. People always want to know why I never bring anyone." Her pulse quickened. The idea of stepping into his world, glossy, polished, full of people who lived in a reality so far from her own, made her stomach twist. I don't exactly have a dress for something like that. That could be taken care of," Michael said simply, not unkindly. Grace wanted to refuse. She wanted to say she wasn't the kind of woman who belonged under chandeliers, surrounded by champagne flutes and sharp smiles. But Kelly, sitting at the table with her cereal, clapped her hands in excitement. "Grace, you have to go. Daddy never takes anyone. You look so pretty." The child's innocence left no room for argument. Grace's cheeks warmed. She lowered her gaze to the dish towel and nodded slowly. "All right." The night of the gala, the city glittered. Manhattan streets gleamed under streetlights, slick with melting snow, taxis darting through the night like fireflies. Inside one of the grandest hotels in Midtown, a ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers and gilded mirrors. Waiters in crisp black uniforms floated between tables, balancing trays of hors d'oeuvres. Grace stepped to the doorway, her arm lightly resting in Michael's. She wore a deep green dress that had been chosen with care, elegant, simple, flattering without being flashy. Her hair, curled softly around her face, shimmered under the lights. The only jewelry she wore was a silver pendant Kelly had begged her to borrow. Her fingers gripped the clutch in her hand a little too tightly. Every pair of eyes seemed to follow her, assessing, calculating, whispering. She stayed close to the edge of the room, trying to shrink into the background, while Michael guided her forward with calm assurance. "You're fine," he murmured. "Just breathe." She nodded, though her chest felt tight. He introduced her to a few colleagues, board members, old acquaintances. Grace smiled politely, shook hands, said little. She could feel the weight of curiosity on her. Who is she? Where did she come from? Why her? The questions hung unspoken in every smile. Later, she found herself near the dessert table, holding a glass of wine she hadn't touched. She focused on the swirling golden liquid, willing her hands not to shake. Then a voice sliced through the noise behind her. "Well, if it isn't the Christmas charity case turned date." Grace turned slowly. The woman standing there was tall, polished, the kind of beauty carved by money and confidence. Her dress clung perfectly, her smile syrupy and sharp at once. She tilted her head, eyes gleaming with recognition. "I knew I recognized you," the woman continued, her tone smooth but dripping with disdain. "You were the one on 48th and 7th, weren't you? Sleeping on a bench with a baby." Heat rushed to Grace's face. The ballroom noise dulled around her, as though she were underwater. "Sweet little rags to riches story," the woman added, swirling her champagne. "Bet it makes for great press. Michael Carter, the hero. How convenient." Grace's grip tightened on her glass. Her heart pounded so loud she could hear in her ears. But her expression remained calm, unreadable. Years of surviving judgment had taught her how to mask pain. She didn't answer. She didn't give the woman the satisfaction. Instead, she set the untouched glass on the table, turned, and walked away. The cold hit her like a slap when she stepped outside. Snowflakes drifted beneath the street lamps, settling into her hair. She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering. But it wasn't the winter air that cut deepest. It was shame. Old, familiar, relentless. She shouldn't have come. She didn't belong here. She never had. Her thoughts swirled until she heard footsteps behind her. "You didn't have to come after me," she said quietly, not turning. "Yes, I did." Michael's voice was steady, warm against the icy night. He slipped off his black overcoat and draped it over her shoulders. The gesture was simple, but it broke something in her. "You didn't deserve that," he said gently. "You never have to explain yourself to anyone. Not anymore." She finally turned, her eyes glistening under the lamplight. His face was close, his expression firm but tender. He wasn't the CEO who signed contracts in sleek boardrooms. He wasn't the man with the penthouse and the Range Rover. In that moment, he was simply someone who saw her, really saw her, and for the first time in years, Grace let herself be seen. Back inside the ballroom, the night carried on. Music swelled, glasses clinked, people laughed. But out under the falling snow, time slowed. Grace breathed deeply, the cold air filling her lungs, washing away the sting of humiliation. Michael's words lingered. "You don't have to explain yourself anymore." No one had ever said that to her. Not her parents. Not the boy who abandoned her. Not the strangers who passed her on sidewalks as if she were invisible. Only him. She looked at the coat draped over her shoulders, heavy and warm. She looked at the man who had offered it without hesitation. And though fear still gnawed at her edges, a new feeling flickered in its place. Fragile, hesitant, but real. Trust. That night, as the Range Rover hummed through the streets back toward the penthouse, Grace stared out the window at the lights of the city. Michael drove quietly, his gaze forward, giving her space. Noah slept soundly in his car seat, tiny breaths fogging the glass. Kelly dozed against her booster, her curls tumbling across her cheek. Grace turned slightly, watching them all. For the first time since she had left home, since she had been cast into a world where every day was a fight to survive, she allowed herself to imagine something more. A place she could stay. A place where she wasn't just surviving. A place where she belonged. And she wasn't sure if that terrified her or saved her. The afternoon sun slanted low across Central Park, painting the snow-covered paths in shades of gold and shadow. Families strolled arm in arm, bundled in coats and scarves, while children tossed snowballs beneath the bare branches. The air smelled faintly of roasted chestnuts from a vendor on the corner, a reminder that Christmas wasn't over yet, at least the city. Grace pushed Noah's stroller slowly along one of the winding trails. Her hands tightened on the handle, partly against the cold, partly against the flood of thoughts she couldn't shake since the gala. She still heard that woman's voice, polished, cruel, reminding her where she came from and how far she didn't belong. But Michael's words echoed louder. You never have to explain yourself to anyone. Not anymore. They had sat with her since that night, warming her in ways the coat around her shoulders never could. She glanced down at Noah. He was bundled tightly in his blue hat, cheeks rosy, his tiny mouth open in sleep. His breath puffed soft clouds against the frigid air. For a moment, the world felt peaceful, almost normal. She let herself imagine she was just another mom out for a walk in the park, not a girl who'd been abandoned with nowhere to go. Grace. The voice stopped her cold. It was sharp, precise, and too familiar. She hadn't heard it in nearly 2 years, but it still struck like a blade. Slowly, she turned her head. Standing near a bench was a woman, in a tailored gray coat, her posture rigid, her hair swept neatly beneath a hat. Her eyes, the same color as Grace's, but colder, scanned her daughter from head to toe. Her mother. Grace's throat tightened. She wanted to turn the stroller and walk away, to pretend she hadn't heard. But her legs refused to move. The woman's gaze dropped to Noah, bundled in the stroller, her lips pressed into a thin line. So it's true, she said flatly. You should not be here. Not in public. Not like this. Grace's heart pounded, her voice barely steady. He's your grandson. Her mother's jaw tightened, but her expression remained unchanged. You chose shame, so did not expect love. The words landed like stones, heavy and merciless. Then, without another glance, the woman turned and walked away, her heels clicking sharply against the icy pavement until she disappeared into the crowd. Grace stood frozen, not shocked, not even surprised, just hollow. Noah stirred in his stroller, letting out a soft whimper. The sound snapped her back. She knelt quickly, adjusting his blanket, kissing his forehead. It's okay, baby. It's okay. But her hands shook. That evening, the penthouse was quiet except for the steady crackle of the fireplace. Michael was upstairs finishing a business call. Kelly sat cross-legged near the Christmas tree, crayons and paper spread around her like a rainbow explosion. Grace curled into the corner of the sofa, staring at the fire, her mind replaying her mother's words again and again. She didn't notice Kelly until the little girl tugged at her sleeve. Look, Grace, Kelly said proudly, holding up a piece of paper. It's your house. Grace blinked and took the drawing. It wasn't just a house. It was a watercolor she had painted a few days earlier, one she hadn't shown anyone. Somehow, Kelly had found it tucked in her sketchbook. On the page was a small, cozy home with warm light glowing from its windows. Snow covered the roof. And in front of the house stood 4 figures, Michael, Kelly, Grace, and baby Noah, all holding hands beneath a Christmas tree strung with golden lights. Kelly pointed at each one. That's me. That's baby Noah. That's Daddy. And that's you. This is our family now, right? The words hit Grace harder than her mother's rejection had. Her chest tightened, her eyes burning as tears welled. She knelt down and pulled Kelly into her arms, holding her and drawing close. Her lips brushed the girl's forehead as her tears finally slipped free. Not tears of shame this time. Not loneliness. But something else. Something she had almost forgotten she could feel. Belonging. Noah whimpered from his stroller, and without hesitation, Grace reached for him too. She wrapped her arms around both children. clutching them against her chest, her shoulders shaking as she let the tears flow. For the first time in years, she cried because her heart was full, not empty. When Michael came downstairs a few moments later, the sight stopped him in his tracks. Grace sat on the floor, her arms wrapped around Kelly and Noah, the firelight catching on the tears that shimmered down her cheeks. The drawing lay beside her, its colors glowing in the warm light. Michael walked over slowly and crouched down, resting a hand gently over hers. His voice was low, steady, almost reverent. "You've carried the world on your shoulders," he said softly. "Let someone carry you now." Grace looked up at him, her eyes red but her smile breaking through. In that moment, there was no distance between them, no walls, no doubts, just recognition of two people who had both known loss, who had both learned to live with it, and who, for the first time in a long time, didn't have to do it alone. Later that night, after the children were asleep, Grace stepped onto the balcony. The city stretched out before her, lights twinkling like scattered jewels. She pulled Michael's coat tighter around her shoulders, breathing in the crisp night air. She thought about her mother's words, sharp and final. "You chose shame, so do not expect love." And then she thought about Kelly's words, soft and certain. "This is our family now, right?" One voice had always defined her worth by what she had lost. The other gave her worth by what she still had. The choice of which to believe had never been clearer. Michael joined her a moment later, holding 2 mugs of steaming cocoa. He handed her one, his fingers brushing hers. "Cold night," he said, glancing at the skyline. Grace nodded, sipping slowly. The sweetness warmed her chest. "Do you ever feel like everything you thought you knew about life was wrong?" He gave a quiet laugh, but his eyes were serious. "Every day since Hannah died." She turned to look at him. The raw honesty in his voice matched the ache in her chest. They stood side by side in silence, 2 broken lives slowly finding a way to mend. The storm rolled in fast that night, sweeping across Manhattan with sheets of snow and gusts of icy wind that rattled the tall windows of the penthouse. Inside, the fireplace crackled, casting a golden glow across the living room. Grace sat curled in the armchair with Noah tucked against her chest, his head nestled beneath her chin. Michael was upstairs in his office, finishing a late-night call with Tokyo investors. Kelly had finally fallen asleep after insisting on one more Christmas story. For a while, it was quiet, the kind of cozy silence Grace had begun to treasure. But then Noah whimpered. At first it was soft, just a restless sound. Grace stroked his back, whispering to soothe him. But the whimpers grew sharper, his tiny arms twitching under the blanket. She pulled back, and her stomach dropped. His cheeks were flushed a deep, alarming red, and sweat clung to his hairline. Her hand pressed against his forehead. The heat seared her palm. "Noah," she whispered urgently, shaking him gently. His eyes fluttered but didn't open. Panic clawed at her chest. She fumbled for the thermometer, her hands trembling. The screen beeped after only a few seconds, 104.2 degrees Fahrenheit. Her breath caught, her vision blurred. "Oh, God!" She bolted upright, clutching Noah against her. "Michael!" she cried, her voice cracking. The sound of hurried footsteps thundered down the stairs. Michael appeared, still buttoning the cuff of his dress shirt, his face instantly tightening when he saw her pale with terror. "He's burning up," Grace gasped. "He won't wake up." Michael didn't hesitate. He crossed the room in seconds, took one look at the baby's limp frame, and grabbed his coat. "We're going. Now." 10 minutes later, the Range Rover tore through Manhattan streets, tires skidding slightly over slush and ice. The city, usually alive even at midnight, felt subdued under the storm. Stoplights glowed eerily against the snow. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, but all Grace could hear was the pounding of her heart and the shallow breaths of her baby. She sat in the back seat, rocking Noah in her arms, whispering over and over, "Stay with me, baby. Please stay with me." Her words came out in broken sobs, like prayers she wasn't sure anyone was listening to. Michael's hands gripped the wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. He drove faster than he should have, cutting through yellow lights, ignoring the phone buzzing endlessly in his pocket. Investors could wait. Tokyo could wait. Everything could wait. My family needs me, he muttered under his breath, eyes flicking constantly to the rearview mirror. Grace barely heard him, her focus locked on Noah's tiny chest rising and falling too quickly, too unevenly. When they pulled up the hospital entrance, Michael threw the car into park and was out the door in seconds. He yanked Noah gently from Grace's arms and sprinted inside. Pediatric emergency, he barked at the front desk. 1-year-old, 104 fever, unresponsive. A nurse appeared instantly, wheeling a crib on a cart. Grace stumbled after them, her legs weak, her hands shaking so hard she could barely hold her purse. Michael kept a steady hand on her back as they rushed through the swinging doors. The waiting room was bright, sterile, and too cold. Grace sank into a chair, numb, her head spinning. The moment the nurses whisked Noah away, she felt like part of herself had been ripped out. Michael remained standing, watching through the glass pane of the door as the pediatric team hovered over the crib. Wires, monitors, the beeper machines, it was all too much, too fast. Finally, Grace's exhaustion won. Her head tilted to the side, eyes closing, her body trembling. Michael turned, seeing her slump in the chair. He walked over, pulled his coat from his shoulders, and draped it over her. He brushed a strand of hair from her face with the gentlest touch. She stirred but didn't wake. "You're safe now," he whispered. "And so is he." Inside the room, Noah looked impossibly small against the hospital bed. His tiny hand, no bigger than Michael's thumb, twitched weakly as the oxygen mask covered his nose. Michael eased into the chair beside him, leaning forward, his large hand enveloping the baby's fragile one. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just held on. Hours passed, snow still falling outside, muffling the world. At one point, Michael's phone buzzed again with call after call from his assistant. He pulled it from his pocket, stared at the screen, then set it face down on the table without answering. Nothing mattered except this moment, because somewhere between Christmas Eve and now, Noah had stopped being someone else's baby. In Michael's heart, he was his, not by blood but by choice. When morning broke, Grace stirred awake under the weight of Michael's coat. Her eyes fluttered open to the sterile lights of the hospital ceiling. She blinked, dazed, until her gaze landed on the scene before her. Michael sat slouched in the plastic chair beside Noah's bed, his head resting against the wall, his arm draped protectively over the crib, his hand still wrapped firmly around Noah's. He was asleep now, but even in sleep, he hadn't let go. The sight undid her. Tears filled her eyes, spilling fast and silent down her cheeks. She covered her mouth with one hand to muffle a sob that broke free. Not because she was afraid, not because she felt alone, but because, for the first time since Noah was born, someone had stayed. By late morning, Noah's fever broke. His cheeks lost their angry red flush, and he stirred, blinking sleepily beneath the oxygen mask. Grace all but collapsed against the crib, kissing his tiny hands, whispering thanks through her tears. Michael was there too, steady as ever, though exhaustion lined his face. Relief softened his eyes, and when Grace looked up at him, she saw it. The truth neither of them had spoken yet. They were no longer strangers. They were family. The ride home was quiet, filled with the softening of the tires over melting snow. Grace cradled Noah against her chest, her hand pressed protectively over his small back. She didn't take her eyes off him, as if blinking might undo the miracle of his steady breaths. From the driver's seat, Michael glanced in the mirror. He saw her there, hair tangled, eyes swollen from crying, holding her baby like he was the most precious thing on earth. And for the first time in years, he felt something warm stir inside him. Hope. When they reached the penthouse, Margaret greeted them at the door, worry etched deep into her usually stoic face. Kelly ran forward, her curls bouncing, her voice high and anxious. "Is Noah okay?" Grace knelt down, showing her the baby's sleepy smile. "He's okay, sweetheart. He's going to be okay." Kelly threw her arms around Grace's neck, squeezing tight. "I prayed for him," she whispered. Grace's eyes brimmed again. "Your prayers worked." Michael stood behind them, his gaze soft. For a moment, he let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, This wasn't temporary anymore. Maybe the broken pieces of their lives could truly fit together. The snow had finally begun to melt, leaving the streets of Manhattan slick with gray slush and the faint smell of salt from the plows. Inside the penthouse, sunlight spilled through the tall windows, casting warm stripes across the hardwood floors. Noah was back to babbling, his little hands reaching for everything in sight, while Kelly twirled in circles, her curls flying like golden ribbons. Grace sat at the kitchen island, sipping coffee Michael had brewed, her mind still haunted by the sterile lights of the hospital. Every time Noah coughed in his sleep, her chest tightened. But it wasn't just fear that weighed on her now. It was something sharper, something deeper, responsibility. She couldn't keep living as a guest in someone else's home, no matter how kind Michael had been. She had to stand on her own feet again, even if she stumbled. That morning, as Michael folded the New York Times at the table, she set her mug down and cleared her throat. "I should start looking for work," she said quietly, but with resolve. Michael glanced up, surprised. "Grace, you don't have to rush." "I want to," she cut in, her voice steady. "I need to earn my way. For Noah, for myself." He studied her for a moment, noting the determined set of her jaw, the way her hands curled around the coffee mug. This wasn't pride. This was survival. The same grit that kept her alive through nights on benches and days in shelters. "All right," he said finally, nodding. "If that's what you want, I'll support you." Her chest loosened. She had expected resistance, maybe even pity, but instead he gave her respect. 2 weeks later, Michael took her to the Upper East Side on a Saturday evening. Grace had assumed it was one of his business errands, and she almost didn't agree to come, but the way he insisted, a quiet smile, no explanation, made her curious. They stopped in front of a narrow storefront tucked between a cafe and a small boutique. Above the door, painted in gold letters, was a sign that made her freeze. Miller and Company, Art Studio, her last name. Her breath caught. "Michael, go on," he said gently, opening the door. Inside, warm light bathed the space. Soft jazz played from hidden speakers. Canvases lined the walls, each one hers. Sketches of Kelly with angel wings, watercolors of Noah asleep, studies of the city skyline from the penthouse windows. And at the center, under a spotlight, hung the drawing she had made of Michael tying Kelly's shoelace beneath the Rockefeller Christmas tree. Grace's hands flew to her mouth. I don't understand." "I remembered something you said," Michael replied, his voice low, "that you didn't just want to paint. You wanted to share what you see. So I bought this place. It's yours." Her voice trembled. "Michael, I can't accept this." "You already did," he said softly. "Every time you picked up a pencil. Every time you saw something the rest of us missed." Tears blurred her vision. She turned in a slow circle, overwhelmed, her heart pounding. She had never been seen like this. Not as a burden, not as a mistake, not as a girl who chose shame, but as an artist, as a mother, as someone worthy. The opening night came faster than she could process. Invitations had gone out quietly to Michael's circle, to locals who supported the arts, to a few of his friends who were curious about this new venture. Grace had panicked at first, wanted to run, but Kelly's excitement anchored her. "Everyone's going to love your paintings," Kelly said with certainty, tugging at Grace's hand. On the night of the event, the gallery filled with a soft hum of voices. Glasses clinked. People wandered from piece to piece, studying her work with thoughtful eyes. Grace hovered in the corner, her hands clenched behind her back, fighting the urge to disappear. Then Michael stepped forward, commanding quiet with nothing more than his presence. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began, his voice carrying through the room. "It's not every day we get to witness something as rare as this. Not just talent, but true heart." He turned, his eyes finding Grace. "This is Grace Miller, the artist, the mother, and the woman who reminded me what love really is." The room fell silent. Grace stood frozen, her chest tight, tears stinging her eyes. Applause began softly, then grew, filling the gallery with warmth. She felt something inside her rise and break loose, a weight she had carried for too long. For the first time in years, she wasn't invisible. She was seen. Later, after the guests had gone, Grace lingered in the gallery. The painting of Michael and Kelly glowed under the spotlight. She reached out, brushing her fingertips lightly against the frame, her throat tight. Michael approached quietly, his hands in his pockets. "I meant every word," he said softly. She turned to him, eyes wet, heart overflowing. "Why me?" she whispered. His smile was warm, steady, certain. "Because you never asked to be seen, but you let me see you anyway." Her breath caught. And this time, when she leaned into him, it wasn't with fear. It was with trust, with love. It was home. That night, back in the penthouse, Grace tucked Noah into his crib and lingered by Kelly's door as the little girl slept, one hand clutching a crayon sketch of their family. The firelight flickered down the hall, and Michael's voice drifted from the living room, low and steady as he wrapped up a late call. Grace pressed her forehead to the doorframe, closing her eyes. For the first time in her life, she felt like she wasn't just surviving. She was living. And though part of her still feared the fragility of it all, another part dared to believe this was only the beginning. The gallery had been open for almost a month, and already Grace's life felt like it belonged to someone else. People she had never met before stopped her in the studio, marveling at her sketches of the city, asking about commissions. Kelly spent entire afternoons at a corner table with her crayons, introducing herself to visitors as the gallery's assistant. And Noah, who had once shivered on a frozen bench, now cooed happily in his stroller as patrons leaned down to admire him. But even amid the warmth of her new life, Grace carried an undercurrent of unease. At night, when the gallery lights dimmed and the penthouse grew quiet, she sometimes lay awake staring at the ceiling. The fear would creep back. The memory of her mother's words, the whispers at the gala, the way her past clung to her no matter how far she tried to run. Michael noticed. One evening, as they sat together on a balcony overlooking the city, he handed her a mug of hot cocoa, steam curling into the cold winter air. "You've been quiet," he said. Grace tucked her knees beneath the blanket draped over her lap. "Just thinking." "About what?" She hesitated, then answered honestly. "About when it all disappears. When people stop clapping. When you realize I'm not enough." Michael's jaw tightened. "Grace." But she shook her head quickly. "You don't know what it's like. Everyone I ever trusted either left me or turned me into something to be ashamed of. Even my parents. Especially them." Michael leaned forward, his voice firm but gentle. "You are not something to be ashamed of. And I don't care what your parents said or what strangers whisper at galas. You are here because you belong here. With me, with Kelly, with Noah." Her throat ached as she fought the tears rising in her eyes. His words were steady, but part of her still wondered if belonging was just temporary, if one day the door would close and she'd be left outside again. The next weekend, Michael invited her to accompany him to a board meeting upstate. It wasn't a formal event, more of a retreat at a colleague's estate. But he wanted her there. "They'll ask questions," Grace warned, adjusting Noah's hat as she packed his bag. "Then I'll answer them," Michael replied simply. The drive was long, through winding snowy roads lined with evergreens. Grace sat in the back beside Noah, watching the trees blur past, her heart heavy with both gratitude and fear. At the estate, the reception was polite but stiff. A few of Michael's colleagues offered her smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. One man made a comment she overheard, something about fairy tale rescues and charity cases. Her stomach twisted, but before she could shrink back, Michael placed a steady hand on her back. "Grace is not a case," he said evenly, his voice carrying across the room. "She's the reason I'm standing here with any clarity at all." The remark silenced the whispers, but Grace's cheeks still burned. Later, as they walked through the snowy garden outside, she looked at him with a mixture of awe and confusion. "You didn't have to defend me like that," she said softly. "Yes, I did," he answered, "because you still think you need defending. And I won't let you believe that." Back at the penthouse that night, Grace tucked Noah into his crib and lingered in the hall. She could hear Michael's voice from the living room, low and steady as he read Kelly a bedtime story. The sound carried warmth, security, the kind of presence she had always longed for as a child. When he finished and Kelly drifted off, Grace stepped into the doorway. "You're good with her," she said quietly. Michael looked up, a small smile tugging at his mouth. "She makes it easy." Grace hesitated, then sat on the arm of the sofa, her hands twisting together. "Sometimes I wonder what it would have been like if Noah had someone like you from the beginning." Michael's eyes softened. "He does now." The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was charged, intimate, filled with things neither dared to say aloud. Grace felt the fear inside her battling with something else, something brighter, stronger, and far more dangerous. Hope. The following week brought another test. Grace's father came to the gallery. She spotted him across the room one afternoon, his familiar frame stiff in an expensive overcoat. Her heart seized. He hadn't spoken to her since the day she left home. His expression was unreadable as he examined one of her watercolors, a portrait of Noah asleep against her chest. "Grace," he said when she finally approached, his tone clipped. "Dad," she whispered, her throat dry. He looked at her, then at the painting again. "You've made yourself visible. That can be dangerous." Her hands trembled. "I'm not hiding anymore." His lips pressed into a thin line. "That man, Carter, he won't protect you forever. Don't mistake his charity for permanence." Anger flared, but beneath it, pain. "It's not charity," she snapped. "It's love." Her father's brows arched slightly, as if amused. Then, without another word, he turned and left, the bell over the gallery door jingling behind him. Grace stood frozen, her chest heaving. The old fear rushed back, that he was right, that this life was fragile, that at any moment it could vanish. When Michael arrived later and found her pale, her shoulders tense, she told him what happened. His reaction was immediate. "You are not your father's words," he said, his voice sharp, "and you don't need his approval to validate who you are." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "Then why does it still hurt so much?" "Because you cared once," he answered gently, pulling her into his arms. "But you don't have to anymore. Not with us here." That night, as Grace rocked Noah to sleep, she thought about the day's events, about her father's disdain, her mother's rejection, the whispers at the gala. And then she thought about Kelly's unconditional love, Michael's steady presence, and the warmth of the gallery filled with her art. One voice told her she was shame. The other voices told her she was home. She pressed a kiss to Noah's forehead and whispered, "We're not going back. Not ever." The night of the gallery celebration arrived with a sharp winter chill, the kind that nipped at cheeks and turned breath into misty clouds. Outside the small studio on the Upper East Side, a string of golden lights framed the doorway, glowing warmly against the cold. Inside, the space buzzed with life. Patrons mingled with glasses of champagne. Critics scribbled notes in small pads, and soft jazz spilled from the corner speakers. Grace stood in front of the mirror in the gallery's back room, smoothing the fabric of her navy dress. It wasn't expensive or elaborate, but it was elegant. Simple lines, a flattering cut, something that made her feel whole. Still, her hands shook as she adjusted the silver pendant around her neck. "This doesn't feel real," she whispered to her reflection. Behind her, Kelly appeared, wearing a sparkly pink dress, her curls bouncing with excitement. She wrapped her arms around Grace's waist. "It's real. It's your night." Grace crouched, hugging her tightly. "How do you always know what to say?" Kelly grinned. "Because I'm your assistant." The door creaked, and Michael stepped in, his presence filling the room. He wore a tailored black suit, his tie perfectly knotted, his eyes steady and calm. When his gaze landed on Grace, he paused, his jaw tightening slightly, as though he'd forgotten how to breathe. "You look—" He cleared his throat, the corner of his mouth tugging into a smile. "You look incredible." Heat rose to her cheeks. She looked away, but the compliment clung to her, warmer than the pendant resting on her skin. "Ready?" he asked. "No," she admitted honestly. "Good," he said with a quiet chuckle. "The best things never come when we're ready." The gallery floor was already crowded by the time they stepped out. Spotlights illuminated her artwork, the sketches of Kelly, the watercolors of Noah, the portraits of New York streets that looked both gritty and tender. People leaned in close, murmuring about the detail, the emotion, the intimacy that radiated from every canvas. Grace hovered at the edge, her heart racing, the murmur of voices buzzing too loudly in her ears. She wanted to disappear, to slip out the back door and vanish into the snowy night. Then she felt it, a small hand slipping into hers. "Kelly, you belong here," the little girl whispered. Grace looked down, and for the first time all evening, she believed it. An hour into the event, Michael tapped a spoon lightly against a champagne glass, and the room fell quiet. All eyes turned to him as he stepped onto the small platform near the front, his tall frame commanding attention without effort. "Thank you all for joining us tonight," he began, his voice strong but warm. "This gallery is not about me. It's not about money or business or reputation. It's about someone who saw beauty in places most of us overlook." He turned then, his gaze locking on Grace. "It's about Grace Miller." A ripple moved through the crowd as heads swiveled toward her. Grace's breath hitched, her pulse thundering in her ears. She wanted to shrink, but Michael's voice anchored her. "When I first met Grace, it wasn't a gallery or at a gala. It was on a street corner in Manhattan, on the coldest night of the year. She had nothing but her strength, her courage, and her son. And yet, even in that moment, she carried dignity. She carried light." Grace's vision blurred with tears. "She reminded me," Michael continued, "that love isn't about status or perfection. It's about seeing people for who they are and standing by them anyway. Grace, you gave that back to me, to my daughter, to my home, to my life." The silence that followed was thick, almost reverent. Then the applause started. Soft at first, then louder, filling the gallery with a warmth that wrapped around Grace like a blanket. Her cheeks flushed hot. She blinked rapidly, trying to steady herself. And then, slowly, she stepped forward. "I don't know what to say," she admitted, her voice trembling but clear. "For so long, I thought my story was just surviving. I thought I was invisible. But tonight, looking at all of you, at my children, at Michael and Kelly, I realize my story is about being seen. Truly seen." A hush settled again. Grace swallowed hard, clutching the pendant at her throat. "And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Sometimes the family you build is stronger than the one you're born into, because it's built on choice, on love." The crowd erupted again, louder this time. Grace felt her knees weaken, her heart bursting with both fear and joy. She caught Michael's gaze across the room, and in that moment, everything else faded. After the speeches, the crowd dispersed into clusters of chatter. Critics approached her, praising her eye for detail, her ability to capture intimacy on canvas. A woman from an arts magazine asked for an interview. Grace answered as best she could, still trembling, still overwhelmed, but holding herself upright with a new kind of confidence. Later, when the gallery finally emptied and only the soft hum of the heater remained, Grace sank into a chair, her body exhausted. Michael approached, loosening his tie, his eyes still locked on her. "You did it," he said simply. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "We did it." He crouched beside her chair, his hand brushing against hers. "Grace, you've changed everything. For me, for Kelly, for all of us." Her chest tightened, her heart racing. "Michael," but he didn't let her finish. "Let me say this," he murmured, his voice low, steady, certain. "I don't care where you came from. I don't care what anyone says. You and Noah, you're not Guess My Life. You are my life." Her breath caught, tears flooding her eyes again. She tried to speak, but the words tangled in her throat. Instead, she leaned forward, her forehead pressing against his, their breaths mingling in the quiet. For the first time, she let herself believe that love, true, unconditional love, was possible. Back at the penthouse that night, the children slept soundly. Grace stood in the living room, staring at the city lights beyond the windows. Michael came up behind her, slipping his arms around her waist. "You belong here," he whispered into her hair. This time, she didn't doubt it. Snow fell gently over Manhattan, the kind of slow, steady flakes that coated the streets without hurry. Inside the Carter penthouse, laughter echoed off the high ceilings. The living room once hollow with silence, now pulsed with warmth and noise. Kelly sat cross-legged on the rug, surrounded by markers and scraps of colored paper. Her curls bobbed as she bent over her project. "It's a Christmas card," she announced proudly. "For our family." Noah, now toddling around in footy pajamas, squealed as he tried to copy her with a crayon clutched in his tiny fist. His lines zigzagged across the paper in wild scribbles, but Kelly clapped like he'd painted a masterpiece. Grace stood in the kitchen doorway, watching them with a smile tugging at her lips. A year ago, she'd been sitting on a freezing bench with nothing but desperation in her chest. Now she stood in a home where light and love filled every corner. She brushed a strand of hair from her face, still hardly believing it was real. Michael appeared beside her, holding 2 steaming mugs of coffee. He handed her one, his eyes lingering on her face. "They've been at it since sunrise," he said with a chuckle. Grace took a sip, warmth spreading through her chest. "They're making more memories than I ever thought possible." He slid an arm around her waist, pulling her close. "That's the point." Later that afternoon, the 4 of them bundled in coats and scarves, walking hand in hand through Central Park. The trees sparkled with frost. The lake glimmered beneath the pale winter sun. Vendors sold hot cocoa and roasted nuts. Children laughed as they tumbled off sleds. They stopped near the same bench where a year ago Grace had sat clutching Noah against the bitter cold. Her steps faltered, her heart pounding at the memory. Michael noticed. He squeezed her hand. "You don't have to remember it that way anymore." Grace looked at him, then down at the children. Kelly was showing Noah how to make snow angels, her voice ringing with laughter. Grace let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "You're right. I don't." They stayed there for a moment, watching the children. The past didn't vanish, but it no longer held her hostage. Instead, it stood as proof of how far they'd come. That evening, the penthouse glowed with twinkling Christmas lights. Stockings hung neatly along the mantel, each one embroidered with name. Michael, Kelly, Grace, Noah. Dinner was loud and joyful. Kelly chattering about her assistant duties at the gallery, Noah banging a spoon against his high chair, Michael teasing Grace about the flour streak on her cheek from baking cookies. After dessert, they gathered by the tree. Kelly handed out her homemade Christmas cards, her grin wide and expectant. "This one's for you, Daddy," she said, pressing a card into Michael's hands. "And this one's for Grace and Noah, because you're ours now." Grace unfolded her card slowly. On the front was a drawing of their family, 4 stick figures holding hands beneath a Christmas tree. Above them, in uneven crayon letters, were the words, "Forever Family." Grace's vision blurred with tears. She pulled Kelly into her lap, hugging her tightly. "It's the best gift I've ever gotten," she whispered. Michael leaned over, his hand resting on Grace's shoulder, his eyes shining as he read his own card. Then he met her gaze, steady and certain. "You know," he said softly, "last year I thought Christmas was just something to get through. I never thought it would feel like this again." Grace swallowed, her heart swelling. "I never thought I'd have this at all." Their eyes held, full of unspoken promises, as Noah clapped his hands, demanding attention with a giggle that sent everyone laughing again. When the children finally drifted asleep, the apartment fell into a peaceful hush. Grace and Michael sat on the couch, the fire crackling in front of them, mugs of cocoa in hand. She leaned into him, her head resting against his shoulder. "Do you ever think about how unlikely this all was?" she asked quietly. "All the time," he admitted. "But the best things usually are." Grace smiled, her eyes closing as the fire's warmth washed over her. "Thank you for giving us more than survival, for giving us home." Michael pressed a kiss to her hair. "Thank you for reminding me what home actually means." On Christmas morning, the children tore open presents while snowflakes swirled outside. Kelly shrieked with delight at her new art set, immediately rushing to sketch Noah with his toy trucks. Grace laughed, her heart so full it ached. As Michael snapped a picture of the moment, Kelly suddenly looked up, her eyes sparkling. "Daddy," she asked, tilting her head, "we're really a family now, right? Forever?" Michael set the camera down, his throat thick as he pulled both children and Grace into his arms. "Yes," he said, his voice breaking into a smile. Forever, sweetheart. Forever. Grace closed her eyes, holding on to the moment like it was the most precious thing she'd ever known. Because it was. The year had taken her from a frozen bench to a home filled with love, from invisibility to recognition, from surviving to belonging. And as a fire crackled and laughter echoed to the penthouse, Grace knew the truth. She had not just found shelter. She had found family. Sparkles that closes a story with warmth, permanence, and emotional resolution. Backhand index pointing right. If you were in Michael's shoes at Christmas Eve, would you have stopped to help Grace and Noah, or would you have kept walking?